Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Okay. So in the last class, if you remember right, we were studying the ecological requirements, right? So we said that ecological requirements has two components. One is climate and then soil requirement. Under the climate, we have studied, how solar radiation affects the growth of rice, right? What is the requirement? It has throughout different growth stages, right? And then we were talking about the temperature requirement for rice. And then there we said that, right, there are some threshold, when it exceeds a previous problem, right? Especially during the flowering stages, right? It leads to sterility. And then obviously the yield decreases, right? And then we also had a look on how the relative humidity and wind affects rice growth and yield, right? And then the water requirement, right? So since most of the rice is cultivated under the lowland systems, right? Under the flooded conditions, this water plays a huge role, right? It requirement plays a huge role, but the requirement for water varies depending on several factors, such as growing seasons, climatic conditions, soil type, and hydrological conditions in the place where you cultivate this rice, right? And then we look some data, right? How much water is required to produce 1 kilogram of rice, and then kind of contribution of the fresh water to cultivate rice around the world. And then we also had a look, what's the level of water we have to maintain in the field for the rice cultivation generally, right? Of course, it varies. And then there are some, tables we were looking, right? Requirement for different operations and for different growth stages, right? Growth stages. And then because of the lack of time, I had to, go fast, especially in terms of soil requirement. But today I'm going to briefly spend some time for that and then move to the next section. So before I move into this one, are there any questions in any areas we have covered so far? Any questions? So were you able to download the slides from the LMS, the lecture slides? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so it's available up to the lecture number 6, right? I have uploaded the slides, right? So you can go and download it and read it, right? So since you don't have any questions, so let me move into the soil requirement for rice, right? Very briefly, and then we can move to the right. Is the slide is visible? Slide visible to you?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. So as you know, right, the rice can be grown in wide range of soils, right? But it should have high percentage of clay content, right? When you describe the soil texture, right? If you remember your fundamental classes or some fundamental courses in soil science, right? The soil texture has 3 components, right? Sand, silt, and clay, right? So especially in soil that is suitable to grow rice, it should have high clay content because the clay particles are small, right? Small. So because of that, their porosity, right, less porosity, they will not allow water to go down, right? So because our objective is we have to have a standing water, right, to grow rice, right? So that's why soils with good water retention capacity, especially high amount of clay, and also the organic matter is important because the soil organic matter also has a capability to increase the soil water holding capacity, right? And also there are several other advantages of having a clay soil with high organic matter content. The reason is, you may have studied in soil science, right? These clay particles, if you look right, the charges, right, in the clay particles, mostly the negative ones, right? So, the nutrients, most of the nutrients are cations, right? You may know, right? K plus, right? Especially NH4 plus, right? So those are the cations, right? Can be attracted by these particles. So the nutrient retention also will be high, right? That is very essential for rice, right? And then if you look the soil pH range, preferred range ranges from 5.6 to 7. Soil pH is very critical because it determines the availability of different nutrients, right? So this particular range is in this particular range, majority of the nutrients are available to the crop, right? And then clay soils will have many fine particles, as I said, right, that will hold water and nutrients, right, because of their negative charges, right, especially the cations, right. So you may have studied in soil science what we call a parameter called cation exchange capacity, right, CEC, right. So when you have more clay particles with organic matter, right, the CEC of the soil will be high. That is very preferable correct, right, for the rice cultivation. And then there are some more information here regarding soil requirement, right? So as I said, soil should not have excessive percolation, right? The percolation means the vertical movement of water, right, through the soil layers, right? So the percolation, right, should not be more than 10 to 20 millimeter per day, right? So this is allowable, but if it is more, what will happen, right? You have to irrigate continuously to maintain that water level, right? Because it's lost, right? If the percolation is high, right, it's very difficult for you to maintain the standing water for rice, right? So it should not be more than 10 to 20 millimeter per day. So you have to remember we study everything for lowland rice, which is cultivated under the flooded paddies, right? But as you study, we had other systems as well, like aerobic rice. For those systems, this will not apply, right? So since the majority of the rice is cultivated under the flooded conditions, so we study this as a general requirement, right? And then their texture is medium to fine texture, right? Fine texture and preferable soil textures are like it can range clay loam, silt loam, and silty clay loam, right? So these are the textures that have these fine, medium to fine particles, right? That will allow you to store water, right, in the field. And then there are soil orders, you may know, right? So the USDA, United States Department of Agriculture, classifies different soil types, right, based on soil orders, right? They have standard needs. You may have studied in the soil science, or you will study that, right? So these are the soil orders, right, where the rice can be cultivated, right? Alphisols, enfisols, histosols. You don't need to remember all of them, right? But at least some, right? Some of them, right? So some of the soil orders are in Sri Lanka as well, especially these alphisols. we have insectisols, right? And then oxysols, right? So those soils are there, right? So those are the odors where the rice can be cultivated, right? So that's all about soil requirement. Are there any questions? Anything you want to ask or discuss or clarify? Yeah, please. What do you mean? Yeah, yeah, that's a good question. You know, in the world, even in Sri Lanka, right, we have different soil types, right? You know that, right? So we have in different places, different soil types. But we need a classification for that, right? We need a classification for that based on their properties. You know that soils will have physical properties, chemical properties, and biological properties, right? So based on them, right, we group them, right, based on the similar characters. So one of such standard ways we classify based on the soil orders, right? This is the classification internationally used, developed by the United States Department of Agriculture, USDA, right? So that is applied everywhere, right? Everywhere in the world, right? So we call them soil orders, right? So these are the soil orders. Usually, rice is cultivated throughout the world, right? So that's why I mentioned it, because I have to show that, right? The rice can be cultivated in diverse soils, right? Diverse soils across the world, right? So that's that, and you should know what are the soil orders that suitable to grow rice. Okay, is it clear? So, is this the first time you are, come across with this soil orders? Oh no, like these names? It should be in the first semester, right? Soil classification. Students, do you remember these names? Like, did you study or no? Maybe not yet, but classification of soil is a very fundamental thing, right? In the soil science courses. Okay. Okay. So, any other questions? Okay, if you don't have questions, so we can move to the next section, right? So this, there may be 2 or 3 um, uh, classes before, right? We had a brief outlook on this growth stages, right? I was explaining what are the major stages, but today we are going to learn it into detail, right? So these growth stages, right, in rice and any crop, right, that indicates the phenological changes, right. The last time also I said, when you take a crop, right, there are 2 things happen. One is growth, right. The second one is development, right. So growth is the increase in the biomass or maybe the thriving, right. So that's what happened with the time plant or crop grows, right. But the same time, right, they go through different phases, right? Different phases in their life cycle, right? So that is called as development, right? So sometimes you can call it as a qualitative change, right? They germinate, they develop leaves, right? They produce branches, and then they produce flowers, right? And they go to maturity, right? So it's kind of different stages they go through. So that is called as develop. Um, Not only for rice, but for all the crop, you can see that, right? So those are phenological changes, right? Changes in the phenology, and then all the crop development in rice, right? Each of the growth stages requires specific management, right? That's why we should know, right? Their growth stages. That classification is required. The reason is the management is different, and also the how they affected by the different environmental factors like stresses also different in each and every growth stage, right? So in this right side, you see a picture, right? So it's a typical rice plant, right? I want you to show because some of you may not know the different parts or different organs it has, right? We will be using when we study these growth stages, right? So this is the below ground portion where we have the roots, right? And then we have the stem, right? Actually, it's since it's a grass, right? So the main stem kind of thing, it's called as culm, right? Right. So then you have the leaf, right? And then this kind of side branches, which in grasses we call them as pillars, right? So around the main stem, right, or main culm, right? We have pillars, right? And from the pillars, they develop the panicle, right? Panicles. So then flowering and subsequent fertilization, they develop into grains, right? So this is the panicle. So these are the basic components a rice plant has, right? A mature rice plant has, right? All right. So in rice, right? You can these growth stages. You can have three main, right? Three main stages. So one is the vegetative stage, right? First one. The second one is the reproductive one, and the third one is the ripening stage, right? Ripening stage. So vegetative stage, right? The period is from germination to stem elongation, right? So we'll study what is stem elongation when we detail come into that particular growth stage, right? And then reproductive stage from the panicle initiation to flowering, pollination, and fertilization, right? So this stage, right, flowering, pollination, and fertilization occurs within a very short period of time, right? So we can have like single stage for them, right? So that is from the panicle initiation. So it's abbreviated sometimes as PI, right? PI stage. Okay. And then ripening stage from grain filling to maturity, right? Uh, After fertilization, grain filling start, and from that time to maturity is ripening stage, right? And then these main growth stages like vegetative, reproductive, and ripening, right, can be further divided depending on their morphophysiology, right? So further divided into their morphophysiological variation, so difference. So that so in this picture, right, this picture that shows, right, these three. Forget about this, this sub stages, right? Let us focus about these three major stages: vegetative, right, reproductive, and then ripening, right? So here, as I said the last time, right? So this think about this last phase, right? So that is from the grain filling to the maturity, right? So that that's kind of fixed time, right? It takes 30 days, right? And then if you come to the reproductive phase, that is from the panicle initiation um, to the flowering and pollination, right? So that is 35, right? That's also kind of fixed, right? So now this 65 days for both reproductive and ripening is kind of fixed, right? But the vegetative phase varies depending on this age group of the rice, right? So that's why they are. So I took this picture, right? That clearly shows, right? If it is a short duration, how many days? If it is a medium duration and long duration, how many days it takes to the vegetative phase, right? In order to calculate this one, so you have to subtract the 65 from their total duration, right? That's very simple math, right? You can simply do that, right? So the truth is that the long age variety will have longer vegetative phase, right? The short age variety will have shorter vegetative phase. But they are reproductive and ripening under general environment, right? So we are talking mostly under the general conditions, right? In which rice is grown, and especially the temperature, right? That determines the duration in crops, right? So under such conditions, right? So this is the normal situation, right? So this 65 is fixed. So depending on the age of the variety, right, your vegetative phase duration will vary, right? Will vary. Is that clear to you?
Yes, sir.
All right. So now we will go into this specific growth stages under these main growth stages. So we said there are three main. First one is vegetative, and then second one is reproductive, and third one is ripening stage. So when we have the subdivisions for growth stages, there are different labeling methods available, right? Available. So there's the one called this numbering system, like from 0 to 9. So this is usually practiced by the International Rice Institute, right? International Rice Research Institute in Philippines, right? They use this numbering system, 0 to 9, right? But there's another growth stage notation system is there. It's called as here I'm writing. It's called as BBCH scale, right? So that's developed in the Europe, right? So they use a different scaling system just to just to identify these different specific stages, right? So you just want to know there's another one. It's called as BBCH scale, right? So that they use a different notation system to identify different growth stages. So it's from Europe, right? Since we are much familiar with this, very close to this theory, so we will use this, what is their practice by the International Rice Research Institute. So according to that, right, so this vegetative stage, so I put them in different colors, so then you can distinguish, right, right? So in the first column, you have the number, right, the growth stage number according to this theory system, right? So that is starting at 0, right? 0 is the germination, right? Specific stage is germination. And then number 1 is seedling stage. The number 2 is the tillering stage. And then number 3 is stem elongation stage, right? So 0 to 3 is the vegetative stage. And then stage number 4. So we are jumping into the reproductive stage, right? So that is starting with panicle initiation and then booting, right? So we will study what are they, right? So just in this table you will have the names, right? Names of the specific growth stages, right? And then we will briefly study what they mean, what happens during those stages. Okay. And then 5 is heading, right? Number 5 is heading. The number 6, flowering, pollination, and fertilization. So this happens, within a short period of time, right? So we can put them together, right? Under stage 6, right? So with that, 4 to 6, 4, 5, 6, 3 specific stages comes under the reproductive stage, right? So that's in red color, right? And then 7, that's the starting of the ripening stage. So where we'll have the milky grain, right? A milk grain stage, and then dark grain stage, and then mature grain stage, right? Again, there are 3 specific growth stages at the latter part of the life cycle of rice. So that is all 3 comes under the ripening stage, right? Ripening stage. So these are the specific growth stages you can find in the second column, and then in the third column I have put it group them into 3 major stages, right? So it's very simple for you to um, understand, right? By their stages and then specific stages. Is that clear? Any questions? Any questions before we move to the specific growth stages in detail? All right. So this table will be very useful to you, right? Simply you can in one slide you can identify everything, right? There are 3 major stages, and then the vegetative stage has 4 subdivisions, right? Starting from 0, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, right? And then 4, 5, 6 reproductive stage, and then 7, 8, 9 ripening stage. Okay? And then this I took from a research paper, right? So where they nicely aligned, right? Different stages, right? Even though they are missing something, right? Some of the, I think they had here 2, 4, 8, right? But they covered majority of the stages with real field pictures, right? Real field pictures. Now you can see, right? That's seedling stage, right? How the rice looks, right? And then tillering, right? It produces tillers, and then elongation, right? And then booting, right? And then heading, and then flowering, and then dough and mature stage. Even though they are missing some photos because it's very difficult to some. For example, you cannot cover PI. It's very difficult to take clear pictures, right? Sometime. But if you have a high resolution camera, you can obviously do it. But sometimes it may be difficult, right? So, but I was able to find a good illustration that shows, throughout the life cycle, how the rice plant looks, right? At each and every stage. So if you go to the stage 0, that is germination, right? So we are going to study now, right? So in this table, so we have the stages ranging from 0 to 9, right? So this 3, 4, 3, right? 7 and 10, right? 10 specific stages we have. So we are going to study all 10, right? In detail. So this is stage 0, right? Germination, right? Germination. So when we sow the seeds, before we sow the seeds, usually we soak the seeds, right? For one day, that's 24 hours, and then we also incubate for another 24 hours, right? That's the usual practice to speed up the germination, right? Or if you want to break the dormancy they had, right? And then the radicle and plumule, right? When during this stage, right, during germination, right? So radicle that is the small part that makes the root portion, right? This one. Can you see this drawing? I am drawing in the red color.
Yes.
Yeah, that is the radicle, right? And then that makes the root, right? That turns into root. But this portion is the plumule, right? Plumule, right? So that makes the shoot, right? That becomes the shoot later, right? So these two, right, components protrude through the hull. The hull is the this cover of this grain, right? Hull, and then polyoptile emerges, right? The polyoptile is the kind of a sheet that covers that primary leaf, right? Primary leaf. So then, with the germination, the initial parts of this root and shoot, right, emerges, right, emerges, and then this you can see here this stage. So that makes this sheath is the polyotile, right? That serves as the protective layer to this primary leaf, right? That's the polyotile, right? And then you see this primary leaf here, right? That is still curled, right? Still curled. It's not expanded fully, right? So it's still curved. So that stage is zero, right? That's the germination stage, right? So I was able to find a very good picture that shows you clearly, how germinating rice grain looks like, right? And then if you move to the stage one, right, that's the seedling stage, right? So it begins with the emergence of the primary leaf, right? When the germination stage, this was curly, right? This was small and curled, right? Now it expands and emerges, right? The primary leaf that breaks through the polyoptile, right? So the polyoptile is, as I said, that's the sheath that covers that primary leaf, serves as a protective uh, cover, right, to that emerging leaf. Okay, then initially we will have the seminal roots around and also around 5 leaves will develop, right? These leaves continue to develop at the rate of usually one leaf in every 3 to 4 days, right? So that's how this seedling stage they produce leaves, right? So you can imagine, right? So at the end, if they want to, right, produce like 5 leaves, like it takes like 2 weeks or maybe 20 days, right? So that's the normal duration for a seedling stage, right? And then radical and seminal roots quickly replaced by fibrous roots, right? I said the radical is the initial part of the root, right? And then they turn into seminal roots and then quickly replaced by these fibrous roots, right? Because it's a monocot plant, right? So as you know, right? So they will turn into the fibrous root. Then they can quickly absorb water and nutrients, and they can grow, right? They can grow. So the seedling becomes ready. So if you are transplanting, right, ready for transplanting by this, usually 15 to 20 days, depending on your variety and conditions, right? That will be ready. Or if you are directly seeding, that will be in the field, right? That will be in the field. So this stage, at the end of this stage, plant will look like this, right? Like a fully developed seedling, right? That may be ready for transplanting, or if you directly seed it, that will be in the field, right? Ready to grow further. So that's stage one, right? Any questions in the germination and seedling stage? Anything you want to ask? Right? And then stage two, right? Stage one, we covered. Stage two, that's the tillering, right? So during tillering, as it means, right, the tillers emerges from the axillary buds of the nodes, right? So in this picture also you can see right? So the primary tillers, right? I said in this picture, right? If you go back, right? So it has a main stem, so that we called as culm, right? Culm in rice, right? So the primary tillers, right? Primary tillers are produced from the main culm, right? So so in this picture, it indicated by M, right? You can see. So that is the main culm, right? Indicated by M, right? So from that, there are several primary, right? Tillers are developing from the axillary buds, right? You can see like P1, right? So this is the P1, and then P2, the primary tiller 2, right? P3 is the primary tiller 3, right? Like that, right? And then secondary tillers are produced from the primary tillers, right? And then this stage goes on, right? From the formation of the first tiller to the maximum number of tillers achieved, right? So each and every variety will have its own maximum number of tillers, right? So until they achieve that, they will be developing tillers, right? And then tertiary tillers also may arise, right, from the secondary tillers, right? So you should know how this order happens, like from the main stem or main culm, what is developing is the primary tillers. And then from the primary tillers, secondary tillers develop. From the secondary tillers, tertiary tillers, right? So in this picture, you don't see the tertiary ones, but you see the secondary one. So P1S1 is the first secondary tiller from the P1. That's the primary tiller, right? Primary tiller, right? So the tertiary tillers may arise from the secondary tillers as the plant grows larger and larger, right? And then number of panicles, right, decided by the number of tillers, right? So that's important because at the end of the if that particular tiller is productive, right? So at the top of this tip, right, what emerges is the panicles, right? Panicles come out of these tillers, right? If they are productive, right? So then, right, so the number of panicles is very important yield component you may have studied now in the practical, right? So that is decided by this number of tills, right? Number of tills. So that's why this stage 2 is also important, right? So that's about the tillering, right? And then if you move to the stage 3, right? That is we call as stem elongation or internode elongation, right? The correct term can be internode elongation because since this is a grass, we don't call it as stem, right? Usually we call stem in type of plants, right? These are grasses, right? We have nodes and internodes, right? So it's correct, maybe the internode elongation, but sometimes they use commonly stem elongation as well, right? That's fine, right? Occurs during the latter part of the tillering. After now you can visualize these events in a sequence, right? Because now earlier they germinated, right? Germinated now, and then when we go to the seedling, they develop the primary leaf and other leaves, right? And then they develop the tillers. Now these tillers need to expand, right? They need to grow in the height, right? So then that increment, how it can happen is through that elongation, right? Through that elongation, right? So occurs during the latter part of the tillering stage, right? But before the panicle initiation, because next stage is the PI. But when we turn into PI, we are moving to the reproductive, right? Reproductive stage, right? So this is the last stage of the vegetative phase, right? So this stem elongation period is longer in long age varieties, right? That is very important. You should know, right? I said that the long duration varieties will have longer vegetative period, right? Because they are reproductive and ripening stages kind of fixed, right? Totally around 65 days, right? Vegetative phase is the one varies, right? So within that vegetative phase, right? So this is the one occurs for a long time, right? Especially in long age varieties, right? When the duration is long, right, the stem elongation happens, right, for a long time, and then they will grow taller, right? Because of this elongation, mostly, right? When you compare the short variety, right, short duration variety, commonly, right, you can think about it, right? This stem elongation period is larger or longer, right, in the long age varieties, right? And then with stem elongation, right, vegetative phase ceases, right? Ceases means stops, right? Right? With this stem elongation or internode elongation phase, right? This vegetative phase stop, right? So at the end of the vegetative phase, right, the canopy size, right? So that is determined by the the leaf area of all the leaves, right? We call it as canopy, right? And rice, right? And other crops as well, right? That is the indicator of the leaf area index, right? So that is determined, right? That is determined, and then plant height is determined, right? And then plant population, that's the density, right? Because the density will tell you, right, how many plants develop successfully, right, in a unit area. In a unit area, how many plants you have now. That by the end of the vegetative phase, you can simply have a look on that, right? So these three components that highly affect the further growth and yield of rice is decided at the end of this vegetative phase, right? At the end of the vegetative phase, these important growth parameters are determined. After that, they will not change much, right? The leaf area will not change much, and then plant height also determined, and then the population also determined, right? So, so, so that's why, right, during the vegetative phase, so you have to target, right, to have an optimum growth for these growth parameters within the vegetative phase by applying, right, all the management carefully, right? Maybe water, maybe fertilizer, right? Maybe you have to control pest and diseases that eats the leaves and all, right? So because by the end of this phase, right, so it's kind of fixed, right? These parameters. So after that, they will not much change, right? They will not change much, right? So that is at the end of the vegetative phase. So now we have covered, right? So if you see, right, we have studied this germination, we have studied seedling stage, we have studied tillering, and stem elongation or internode elongation, right? So these all four makes your vegetative phase or vegetative stage. And another thing you should know, sometimes people call it as stage or sometimes they call it as phase, right? Whatever it is, fine, right? Stage or phase. Vegetative stage, sometimes you can find in the reading materials, or maybe vegetative phase, right? So we have studied so far, right, the vegetative stages, the specific stages within the vegetative stage. That ranges from 0 to 3. So it covers four, right? Four specific stages. Any questions? Anything you want to ask? No questions? So is it clear? Or am I too fast? Or what do you think? Right? Anyone want to talk? Like
It's clear, sir. We understood.
okay. I hope the speed also okay because we have to cover some more stuff right within this limited time. So I will end this class today, and then today we will meet at 1 p.m. Okay. I discussed with your budget, so he said we'll have time 1 to 2. So we'll have another session at 1 p.m. today. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
I will send the